He found her, the way men like him found most things by accident in the dark, in a place where no one was supposed to survive. Damien Valenti, crouched beside the woman, collapsed against the cold concrete wall. Her breathing shallow, her fingers curled inward like she was still bracing for the next blow. He had walked into that warehouse expecting to find a traitor. Instead, he found her. He pressed 2 fingers to the side of her neck, felt the pulse weak but stubborn, and asked the only question that mattered. "Who did this to you?" She opened her eyes. And what he saw inside them was not fear. It was warning. "You don't want to know," she whispered. If you are watching this story for the first time, welcome. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss a story, and drop a comment telling us what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Damien had built his entire life on the belief that there was nothing in Chicago he could not handle. He had inherited an empire from a man who ruled through silence and force. He had survived assassination attempts, federal investigations, and betrayals that would have broken anyone else. He was 38 years old, and he had stopped being surprised by anything years ago. Then he found Elena Marquez bleeding on a warehouse floor. It started the way most nights started for Damien. A phone call. A problem. Someone had taken something that belonged to him, and he went to retrieve it personally. That was who he was. The kind of man who did not send others to clean up his messes. The kind of man who showed up himself in the dark without warning, so that the people who underestimated him would not get a second chance to repeat the mistake. He had gone to the warehouse district on the south side, looking for Marco Reyes, a low-level accountant who had been skimming from Damien's legitimate business accounts for 8 months. A small theft by the standards of what Damien controlled. But it was never about the money. It was about what the theft meant. It meant someone inside his organization felt safe enough to steal from him. And that feeling of safety was the most dangerous thing Damien could allow. He arrived at the warehouse at 11:45 that night. The rain had been falling for hours, the kind of cold November rain that soaked through everything and made the city smell like metal and old stone. He moved through the side entrance with 2 of his men, Marcus and a younger guard named Soto, both of whom understood that their job tonight was to stay back unless called. Marco was not there. That was the first thing that told Damien something was wrong. Marco was a man who followed patterns. He had been meeting someone at this location every Wednesday night for 6 weeks. Damien's people had tracked the pattern carefully. Marco should have been there. Instead, the warehouse was empty. Damien moved through the space, slowly checking the corners the way he had trained himself to do. He was almost at the back exit when Marcus held up a hand. "You hear that?" Damien stopped. He heard it. A sound so small it barely registered above the rain. Not a cry. Not a call for help. Something quieter than that. The sound of someone trying very hard not to make any sound at all. He found her on the other side of the metal shelving unit near the back wall. She was sitting with her back against the concrete, knees pulled partway up. One hand pressed flat against her ribs, like she was holding herself together from the inside. Her dark hair was soaked and tangled across her face. Her jacket had been torn at the shoulder. Even in the dim light, Damien could see the bruising along her left cheekbone and the dried blood at the corner of her mouth. She heard him coming before he reached her, and she flinched. Her whole body went rigid, arms tightening, chin lifting. Not in submission, in defiance. Like whatever they had done to her, they had not managed to break that one last reflex. The refusal to show weakness to someone she did not know. Damien stopped moving. He crouched down to her level, keeping his distance, keeping his voice quiet. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were dark, and despite the pain she was clearly in, there was something sharp inside them. Something calculating. Even now, even like this, she was reading him. "Who are you?" she asked. "Someone who can get you out of here," he said. "That is enough for right now." "That is not an answer." "No," he said. "It is not." She held his gaze for another moment. Then she said very quietly, "I cannot walk." He could see that. Her right ankle was twisted at an angle that told him it was either badly sprained or fractured. She had been sitting in that position because moving hurt too much to attempt without help. Damien stood up, turned to Marcus and said, "Get the car to the east entrance." Marcus left without a word. Damien turned back to the woman. "I am going to carry you. Is there anything I need to know before I move you? Anything broken that you know of?" She looked at him like no one had ever asked her that before. Like the simple act of being asked was something she did not know how to process quickly. "My ribs," she said. "The left side. I think 2 of them." "Okay," he said. "I will be careful." He lifted her as gently as he could, and even then, she made a sound she clearly did not want to make. A sharp, contained sound that she cut off almost before it started. Like she had been practicing not reacting to pain for longer than tonight. He carried her to the car. He put her in the back seat with a jacket folded against the window so she could lean without pressing against the door. She did not thank him. She did not speak at all. She sat with her eyes forward, her jaw set, her hands flat on her knees. "Hospital," Damien said to Marcus. "No," the woman said immediately. Damien turned to look at her. "No hospital," she repeated. Her voice was steady in a way that made it clear this was not fear-talking. This was a decision she had made before tonight, or was making right now, with full awareness of what it meant. "I cannot go to a hospital." "You have broken ribs and what looks like a fractured ankle," Damien said. "You need more than I can give you." "I need somewhere safe," she said. "A hospital is not safe." He looked at her for another long moment. She met his eyes without flinching. There was no hysteria in her expression, no desperation. She was telling him something true, and she was doing it calmly, and that calmness was the thing that made him believe her. "I have a doctor," he said. "Someone I trust. He will come to us." She thought about that for exactly 3 seconds. Then she nodded. Damien took out his phone and made the call. His name was the woman said finally, as the car moved through the wet streets. "Elena," she paused. "You have not told me yours." "Damien." She went very still. It was subtle, barely visible. But Damien had spent his entire life reading people, and he saw it. The slight change in the set of her shoulders. The way her breathing shifted for just a moment before she controlled it again. She knew that name. She had a reaction to it, and she was working very hard to make sure he did not see it. He let it go. For now. Dr. Felix Okafor arrived at Damien's secondary residence 40 minutes later. He was a quiet man in his late 60s, a former trauma surgeon who had done work for Damien's organization for 11 years, always discreetly, always without questions. He examined Elena in the downstairs guest room while Damien waited in the hallway. 20 minutes later, Felix came out and pulled the door nearly closed behind him. "2 cracked ribs," Felix said quietly. "Not displaced, so no surgical intervention needed, but she needs rest, and she needs to stay wrapped for at least 3 weeks. The ankle is a severe sprain, not fractured. The bruising on her face is consistent with blunt force trauma. Someone hit her with fists, not an object. Multiple impacts." He paused. "This was not a robbery, Damien. The injuries are patterned. Someone was sending a message." "How long has she been out there?" "Based on the state of the bruising and the exposure symptoms, I would estimate 4 to 5 hours. In that cold with cracked ribs, she is lucky she did not go into shock." Damien nodded once. "Stay close tonight." Felix left. Damien pushed open the door and stepped inside. Elena was sitting up against the pillows, the blanket pulled to her waist. The dried blood had been cleaned from her face. Without it, she looked younger than he had estimated. Early 30s, maybe. Her dark eyes tracked him as he came and sat in the chair beside the bed. "Doctor says you will live," Damien said. "Generous of him," she said. "Who did this to you?" She looked at him carefully. There was a long silence, and he could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Not dishonesty exactly. More like triage. Deciding what was safe to give and what to keep. "I do not know their names," she said. 3 men. They were waiting for me at my apartment building. They took me in a car and drove for about 20 minutes, then brought me to that warehouse." "What did they want?" "They wanted me to tell them where something was." "What something?" Another pause, shorter this time. "Files," she said. Documents I put together over the past 18 months. Documents about what? She tilted her head very slightly, and for just a moment, the careful control dropped, and he saw something underneath. Something that was not fear, but was adjacent to it. A kind of weight. The look of someone who had been carrying something for a very long time, and was trying to decide if this was the moment to put it down. About a financial network, she said slowly. One that moves money between organizations that are not supposed to know each other exist. Politicians, corporate executives, and certain criminal operations in this city. Damien kept his expression neutral. Including yours, she said. The room went quiet enough that he could hear the rain still falling outside. He did not react. That was one of the most important skills he had developed over 2 decades in this world. The ability to receive a sentence that should have floored him and give nothing away in return. You are accusing me, he said. No, she said. I am telling you what the documents show. There is a difference. She held his gaze. I do not think you know everything that is happening inside your own operation. I think there are people using your infrastructure without your knowledge, and I think they tried to kill me tonight because I can prove it. Damien said nothing for a moment. Then he said, and why would you tell me this if what you are saying is true? I could be exactly the kind of person you should be running from. Elena was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, and there was something in it that he could not quite identify at first. A kind of tiredness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. Because you asked me who did this, she said. Not what I was carrying, not what I knew. You asked about me, and you carried me to your car and called a doctor and told him to be careful with my ribs. She paused. Men who do not care do not do those things. Damien absorbed that. He stood up and walked to the window. He could see the rain on the glass, the blurred lights of the city beyond. What is your name? He asked, though Felix had already told him. He wanted to hear her say it. Elena Marquez, she said. He turned around. I know that name. I know you do, she said quietly. The tension in the room sharpened. You were a financial analyst, he said. You disappeared 2 years ago. There were people looking for you. Yes, she said. Were they my people? Some of them, she said. Not under your orders, but under orders connected to your organization. Damien came back to the chair and sat down. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and looked at her directly. I am going to ask you something, and I want the truth. Not the managed version, the actual truth. He waited until she nodded. Why were you in that warehouse district tonight? My people traced Marco Reyes, an accountant who has been stealing from me, to that exact location. You were in the same building. That is not coincidence. Something shifted in her face, very slightly, but it shifted. No, she said. It is not. She reached slowly toward the inside of her jacket, which had been folded on the nightstand. She pulled out a thin USB drive that had been tucked into the lining, so small and flat, it would have been invisible to anyone who did not know to look for it. She held it out toward him. Damien looked at it without taking it. Marco Reyes, she said, was not stealing from you. He was being paid to move money through your accounts. Small amounts. Irregular intervals. The kind of transfers that look like theft when someone investigates because they are designed to look that way. She kept her arm extended, the drive balanced on her palm. Marco is on that drive. So is the account structure. So is the name of the person inside your organization who has been running this operation for the past 3 years. Damien still did not take it. Why were you meeting him? I was not meeting him, she said. I was following him. I have been tracking this network for 18 months. Marco was the weakest link. I was going to approach him tonight and offer him a way out in exchange for testimony. Her voice was completely even. Someone got there first. The men who took you. Yes. So they were already watching Marco. They have been watching Marco for weeks. They knew someone was getting close. They just did not know it was me until tonight. Damien finally reached out and took the drive from her hand. He held it loosely, feeling the weight of it, which was almost nothing physically, and everything in every other sense. You said there is a name on here, he said. Someone inside my organization. Yes. Are you going to tell me who it is? Elena looked at him for a long moment. The rain pressed against the window. Somewhere down the hallway, Felix was probably still gathering his things, maybe having a quiet cup of coffee in the kitchen, the way he always did after a difficult call. His name is Vincent Caruso, she said. He has worked for you for 9 years. He handles your financial compliance. He has your complete trust. She paused. And for 3 of those 9 years, he has been feeding information and redirecting funds to a network that includes 2 state senators, a federal prosecutor, and a man named Richard Ashmore, who you have never met, but who has been profiting from your organization's operations without your knowledge. Damien's expression did not change, but his hands went very still. Vincent Caruso, the man Damien's father had personally recruited, the man who had been at every funeral, every negotiation, every moment of crisis for nearly a decade. The man who knew more about the internal workings of Damien's operation than almost anyone alive. You are certain, Damien said. I have documentation going back 38 months, she said. Transaction records, communication logs, 2 recorded conversations. She nodded toward the drive. All of it is there. He turned the drive over in his fingers once. You should have gone to the FBI, he said. I tried, she said. The federal prosecutor I went to is Richard Ashmore's business partner. I was in FBI custody for 11 hours before I realized what was happening and got myself out. Her voice remained flat and factual, the way someone's voice gets when they have processed a trauma so many times it no longer has the power to shake them. That was 18 months ago. I have been building this quietly ever since. Alone. Alone. Damien set the drive on the edge of the nightstand. He stood up again, and this time he walked to the door. Get some sleep, he said. We will talk more in the morning. And if I am not here in the morning? She asked. Not a threat, not a question about safety. A genuine uncertainty, as if she had spent so long trusting no one that the question of whether she would still be somewhere in 12 hours was not a thing she took for granted. He turned in the doorway and looked at her. You will be here, he said. And so will I. He left the door slightly open. He walked down the hallway and into the kitchen and sat at the table without turning on the light. Marcus came in a few minutes later and leaned against the counter. Who is she? Marcus asked. Someone with a problem, Damien said. Our problem. Damien was quiet for a moment. He turned the USB drive over in his fingers. He thought about Vincent Caruso's face at his father's funeral, standing in the front row with his hand on Damien's shoulder, the very picture of loyalty. He thought about Elena's voice, saying the words with a kind of patience that made it clear she had rehearsed them in her head so many times they had become fact. Not accusation, fact. He thought about the way she had looked at him in the warehouse when he first crouched down beside her. Not with fear, with assessment. The way you look at something you are not sure is safe, but you have run out of other options. Yes, Damien said finally. Our problem. He set the drive on the table between them and looked at it for a long time. He had built his entire empire on the principle that he saw everything that happened inside his operation. He had made that belief the foundation of every decision, every alliance, every trust extended, and every punishment delivered. And tonight, a woman covered in bruises, sitting in a warehouse in the rain with 2 cracked ribs, had handed him proof that someone had been inside his walls for 3 years. Not an enemy he had underestimated. Someone he had loved. That was the thought that stayed with him long after Marcus went back to his post, and the house went quiet, and the rain finally began to ease. Not the betrayal itself. The love. That was the thing he had never learned how to protect himself from. Damien did not sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table until the rain stopped, and the city outside went from black to the particular gray that comes just before dawn, and he turned the USB drive over and over in his fingers, like a coin he could not decide whether to spend. Marcus had gone quiet hours ago. Felix had left before midnight. The house had settled into the kind of silence that only exists when someone is very deliberately not making noise in another room. She was awake. He knew it without checking. He could feel it the way you feel weather before it arrives. At 5:30 in this morning, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to a man named Garrett Cole, a forensic accountant who had done independent verification work for Damien's organization twice before, and who understood completely that the compensation he received included his permanent discretion. The second call was to his personal attorney, a woman named Diane Park, who had been handling Damien's legal affairs for 6 years, and who answered on the second ring, despite the hour without any trace of irritation, because she had learned long ago that when Damien Valenti called before sunrise, irritation was not a useful response. "I need a clean analysis of internal financial transfers," he told Diane, "cross-referenced against external account activity. I need it without going through anyone on my current compliance team." There was a brief silence on the other end. "That is an unusual request," Diane said. "Yes," Damien said. "It is." Another silence. Then, "Timeline. 48 hours. I will need access. You will have it by 8 this morning." He hung up and sat for another moment with the drive on the table in front of him. Then he picked it up and walked down the hallway and pushed open the guest room door. Elena was not in the bed. His first reaction was sharp and immediate, and he was already turning toward the window when he heard her voice from the corner of the room. "I am here." She was sitting in the armchair near the far wall, legs folded under her, despite the wrapped ankle, because apparently discomfort was something she had decided to work around rather than accommodate. She was wearing the same clothes she had been found in minus the torn jacket. Her hands were in her lap. She looked like someone who had spent the night not sleeping and had made peace with that fact sometime around 3 in the morning. "You should be lying down," Damien said. "I do not sleep well in places I do not know," she said. "I did not want to be horizontal if someone came through the door." He looked at her for a moment. Then he pulled the chair from the small writing desk and turned it around and sat facing her. "I made calls this morning," he said. "I have people looking at the financial records independently of anyone inside my organization. If what you put on that drive is accurate, we will have confirmation within 2 days." Elena nodded once, slow measured. "It is accurate." "I believe you," Damien said. "That is not what I am confirming. What I am confirming is the scope. How far it goes. How many accounts. How many names." He paused. "Whether there are people I have not identified yet." Something moved through her expression. Not surprise exactly. More like recognition. Like she had wondered whether he would take the careful path or the fast one, and now she had her answer. "There are more names," she said. "Vincent Caruso is the most important one inside your organization, but he is not the only connection point." "Tell me." She uncurled herself from the chair, slowly favoring her left side without making a production of it, and reached under the mattress of the bed. She pulled out a folded piece of paper, handwritten dense with notations in a small, precise script. "I did not trust that the drive would not be taken while I slept," she said, and handed it to him. He opened it. The paper was covered in a web of names and arrows and account numbers laid out in a pattern that he recognized immediately as a mapping structure. She had drawn the network by hand from memory in the hours before dawn. Damien studied it. 3 of the names on the paper were people he knew, not as associates, as people he had trusted on a personal level. His chest did not move differently. His face did not change. But somewhere underneath the stillness, something that had been loosely held pulled very tight. "How long have you known about these 3? He asked, pointing to the names without touching them. "The 2 on the left 14 months, she said. "The one on the right I identified 6 weeks ago. And you said nothing." "I said nothing to you," she corrected quietly. "I had no relationship with you. I had no way to know whether telling you would protect me or get me killed." He looked up from the paper. "What changed?" She met his eyes directly. "You carried me to your car and asked a doctor to be careful with my ribs." The simplicity of the answer landed in a way he had not expected. He looked back at the paper. "Walk me through it," he said. "All of it, from the beginning." She took a breath. "I need coffee first," she said. "And I need you to understand that this conversation is going to change what you believe about the last several years of your life. I want to make sure you are ready for that." "I am ready." "People say that," she said, standing slowly. And then they are not. She moved toward the door, and he stood and followed her down the hallway to the kitchen. She found the coffee without being told where it was, which told him she had already been out of the room at some point during the night and had oriented herself to the space. He filed that away without comment. A woman who surveyed her environment before she needed it was a woman who had learned to survive through preparation. He sat at the table. She brought 2 cups and sat across from him, and then she began to talk. It started 2.5 years ago, she told him. She had been working as a senior financial analyst for a private investment firm called Carver Meridian, which managed capital for a group of high-net-worth clients across the Midwest. Her job was routine compliance work pattern analysis, flagging irregularities. She was good at it. She had been doing it for 8 years, and she knew what normal looked like, which meant she also knew the exact shape of what was not normal. The irregularity she found was small enough that most analysts would have closed the file and moved on. A series of transfers between a holding company based in Delaware and a secondary account registered to a real estate management firm in Evanston. The amounts varied. The intervals were irregular. But the pattern underneath them, when she mapped it over 14 months, was not random. It was structured. Someone had designed it to look random, which meant someone had designed it. She kept looking. Over the next 4 months, she traced the Delaware holding company through 7 layers of corporate structure and found that its ultimate beneficial owner was a man named Richard Ashmore, who held a senior position on the board of a nonprofit infrastructure foundation with state government contracts. She traced the Evanston real estate firm and found that 2 of its 3 principals had previously worked for a financial services company that had been quietly dissolved following a federal investigation 3 years earlier. An investigation that had been dropped before charges were filed. Then she found the 3rd thread, a series of consulting fees paid through a subsidiary account to a private security and logistics company. The company was legitimate on its surface. It provided security services to several businesses in Chicago. But when she cross-referenced the payment dates against the financial activity she had already mapped, the timing matched perfectly. The consulting fees were not for services rendered. They were percentage payments. Shares of whatever was being moved through the system, landing in the right hands at the right intervals. She brought it to her supervisor at Carver Meridian. Her supervisor told her she was over-interpreting transaction data. He told her to close the file. She did not close the file. 2 weeks later, her supervisor called her into his office and told her that her position was being eliminated as part of a departmental restructure. She was given 30 days' notice and a severance package that was generous enough to be conspicuous. She took the 30 days. She spent them copying everything she had found onto external storage before she lost her system access. On her last day at Carver Meridian, she came back to her desk after a lunch break and found that her office had been cleared. Her personal items were in a box by the door. Her access had been revoked 4 hours early. Someone had known she was still looking. She went home. She started rebuilding the picture from the copies she had saved. She was careful. She used Public Computers Library Network's research accounts that could not be linked to her name. Over the next several months, she kept pulling at threads, and the more she pulled, the larger the structure became. "That was when I found Vincent Caruso," she told Damien. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. "His name appeared in a communication log I got access to through a secondary contact. He was not using his real name. He was using a consulting alias. But the account identifiers matched records that were registered to a shell company I had already traced back to your organization's financial infrastructure." Damien had not spoken in almost 20 minutes. He sat with his hands flat on the table, listening with the kind of attention that was entirely internal. No visible reactions, no interruptions, just absorption. "Who else knows what you know?" he asked. "No one," she said. "Not completely. I have fragments out with 2 people I trust held as insurance. But the full picture exists only on that drive and in my head." The FBI contact who turned out to be compromised. Richard Ashmore's partner, she confirmed. Federal prosecutor named Holt. He had me brought in under the pretense of a voluntary interview regarding a different matter. By the time I understood what was happening, I had been in that room for 11 hours and they had gone through my apartment. "They took your files." "They took what they could find," she said. They did not find everything. A pause. I had learned by that point not to keep everything in one place. Damien looked at her. After that, why did you not leave Chicago, leave the country even? With what you know, you could have gone anywhere. She set down her coffee cup. She looked at the table for a moment, then back up at him. Because the people this network has been protecting are still in place. The senators, the prosecutor, the financial architects behind all of it. If I disappear, everything they have built continues. The people they have damaged continue to have no recourse. Her voice was steady, but underneath the steadiness was something old and worn, like a road that has carried too much weight for too long. I am not willing to leave and let it continue. Why? He said. Not skeptical. Genuine. Most people would. She was quiet for a moment. Because I know what it costs when someone with the ability to stop something decides it is not worth the risk. Her eyes met his. I have seen what that looks like up close. I decided a long time ago that I would not be that person. Damien held her gaze. Then he said, You know something else, something you have not told me yet. It was not a question. It was the observation of a man who had spent decades reading people in high-stakes situations, and he had been watching her throughout the entire conversation with the same quiet attention he had been listening with. And there was a shape to what she was telling him. A shape that was almost complete, but not quite. Like a map with one territory still blank. Elena's hands tightened slightly around the coffee cup she had set down. There are things I need to verify before I tell you everything, she said. That is not an answer. No, she said. It is not. She looked at him steadily. Some of what I know involves your father. The words landed in the kitchen like something physical. Damien went very still. Not the controlled stillness of a man managing his reaction. Something deeper than that. The kind of stillness that happens when the ground under a word you thought you knew shifts without warning. My father has been dead for 4 years, Damien said. I know, Elena said. What I know about him is not about what he did wrong. It is about what was done to him. She paused. And about what was hidden from you after he died. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. Damien stood up from the table slowly. He walked to the window. He stood there with his back to her, and for a long time, he did not say anything. She did not push. She sat with the silence the way someone sits with it when they have given the person in the room something heavy to hold, and they understand that holding it takes time. How long have you known? He finally said. About your father, specifically 14 months, she said. It was one of the things I found while I was tracing the network. And you did not tell me. I did not know you, she said. I did not know what you would do with it. Information like that given to the wrong person at the wrong moment gets people killed. He turned around. And now? She looked at him directly. Now I am in your house with 2 cracked ribs because someone tried to silence me before I could tell anyone anything. I think the calculation has shifted. He came back to the table and sat down. His eyes were steady and very dark, and he looked at her the way he looked at things. He was deciding how much to trust, which was the same way he looked at everything. Completely. Without blinking. Tell me what you know about my father, he said. Not yet, she said. Not until I have the verification I am waiting on. Because what I am going to tell you is going to change how you see the last 4 years of decisions you have made, and I will not do that to you without being completely certain of what I am saying. Her voice was quiet, but absolute. Give me 48 hours. Let your people look at the financial records, and then we will sit at this table again, and I will tell you everything. He studied her face. There was a calculation happening inside him that she could probably see. The tension between the need to know now and the understanding that she was not withholding out of manipulation. She was withholding out of precision. She was the kind of person who did not say things until she was certain of them, and she was asking him to respect that for 2 more days. He nodded once. 48 hours, he said. She nodded back. He stood to leave. Then he stopped. The men who took you last night, he said. 3 of them, you said. Can you describe them? She gave him physical descriptions. Height, approximate weight, voice patterns. One detail she had noticed on the wrist of the man who had driven the car, a tattoo of a compass rose, old, faded, the kind that military personnel sometimes had done in their 20s. Damien listened. He did not write anything down. He did not need to. "One more thing," she said. He waited. "Vincent Caruso does not know I survived last night," she said. "As far as the people who took me are concerned, I was left in that warehouse. My guess is they expected the cold and the injuries to finish what they started." Her eyes were very calm. "That means I have a window of time before they know they failed. And so do you." Damien understood exactly what she was saying. She was telling him that the most dangerous window was also the most useful one. The moment before an enemy knows they have missed is the moment when they are most exposed. He nodded. "Do not contact anyone," he said. "Do not use any device. Do not leave this house." "I understand." "And eat something," he said, which was not a thing he had planned to say, but it came out in the same tone as the rest of it, and she blinked once in a way that suggested it surprised her too. "I will," she said. He left the kitchen. He went down the hall to the room he used as an office in this house, and he sat at the desk, and he stared at the wall for a long time before he picked up his phone. He called Marcus first. "Find me everything you can on a tattoo," he said. "Compass rose, right wrist, old ink, military style. Cross-reference against anyone connected to private security work in Chicago in the last 5 years. Start with companies that have had contracts with the city or state government." "That is a wide net," Marcus said. "Make it wider," Damien said. He hung up and made the next call. Then the next one after that. By 9 in the morning, he had 6 separate people working. 6 separate threads of investigation. None of them aware of the others, each operating only within the boundary of the specific task he had given them. Compartmentalization was not just a habit. It was the reason he had survived this long in a world where information was the most dangerous currency in existence. At 10:15, Garrett Cole called back. "I started the preliminary pass on the accounts you sent over," Garrett said. His voice carried the particular flatness of a man who was good at his work and already did not like what he was finding. "There are patterns here that are not consistent with the stated business purpose of the accounts. I need more time for a complete analysis, but I can tell you right now that someone has been running a parallel ledger inside your financial infrastructure for at minimum 2 years, possibly longer." "Possibly longer," Damien repeated. "The earliest anomaly I can identify in this preliminary pass goes back 3 years and 2 months, Garrett said. "But the structure of what I am seeing suggests it did not start from scratch at that point. It looks more like a refinement of something that was already operating. Like someone improved the concealment method 3 years ago because they had learned what worked and what did not." "Which means it could have been running longer." "Yes," Garrett said. "Potentially significantly longer." Damien thanked him and ended the call. He sat with that for a moment. Potentially significantly longer. His father had died 4 years ago. Had believed in his final months that his organization was secure. Had trusted the people around him with a completeness that Damien had always privately considered one of his father's few genuine weaknesses. Not stupidity. Never that. His father was one of the most intelligent men Damien had ever known. But his father had believed that loyalty once established was permanent. He had never fully understood that loyalty was not a fixed condition. It was a daily choice. And some people stopped making it without ever saying so out loud. Damien got up from the desk and walked back to the kitchen. Elena was at the counter moving carefully around the space, her wrapped ankle slowing her but not stopping her. She had found bread and eggs and was doing something quiet and focused with both of them. She looked up when he came in. "Garrett Cole," he said. "My forensic accountant. He says the anomalies in the accounts may go back further than 3 years. She did not look surprised. "How much further? He does not know yet." She turned back to the counter. "Longer than 4 years," she said quietly. It was not quite a question. "He is still working," Damien said. "But yes, possibly." She nodded slowly, said nothing. "You already knew that," he said. "I suspected it," she said. Some of the documentation I found had reference points that suggested the original infrastructure was older, but I did not have enough certainty to say it definitively. Elena. She turned to look at him. Her face was composed in that particular way it got when she was holding something carefully. "How did you originally come to work for my father?" he said. The question sat between them. She held his gaze for a long moment. The morning light in the kitchen made the bruising on her cheek look darker. She had not complained about it once since last night. "That is part of what I need to verify before I tell you everything," she said. "You knew him," Damien said, not accusing, establishing. "You knew my father personally." A pause that was a fraction too long. "Yes," she said quietly. "I did." Damien looked at her. She held the eye contact without flinching, but he could see the effort it took not to maintain the composure, but to maintain it while being looked at by him specifically. There was something in the way she met his eyes that was careful in a personal way. Not professional caution, something older than that. "How well," he said. She turned back to the counter. "Give me the 48 hours, she said. Her voice was very quiet. "And I will tell you everything. All of it. Without holding anything back." He stood in the kitchen doorway for another moment. Then he said, "I will give you the 48 hours. He left the room. He walked back to his office and sat at the desk and looked at the wall again, and this time what he was looking at was not a problem to solve. It was a shape he could not quite see yet. The outline of something that had been present in his life for longer than he had understood, arranged around him without his knowledge by people who had understood exactly how much he did not know. He thought about his father's face in the last year of his life, the way the old man had grown quiet in a particular way. Not defeated, something more deliberate than that. Like a man who had arrived at a conclusion he was not sure how to share. Damien had always assumed that quietness was illness. The body slowing down, drawing inward. Now he was not certain what it was. He picked up the USB drive from the desk where he had set it and held it between his fingers. 48 hours. He had given people less time for more ordinary problems. But this was not an ordinary problem. This was the entire architecture of everything he believed about the last 4 years of his life, and the woman in his kitchen was the only person alive who could tell him whether that architecture was built on truth or on a story someone else had constructed for him. He was not a man who liked waiting, but he understood with the cold clarity that had kept him alive through decades of decisions that did not allow for mistakes that some information was worth the wait. He set the drive down. He opened his laptop, and he began quietly and with complete focus to build a picture of Vincent Caruso's last 3 years from every angle that did not require asking Vincent Caruso a single question. The 48 hours passed the way all genuinely dangerous waiting passes, slowly on the surface, silently underneath. Damien did not sleep the first night. He worked through it building the picture of Vincent Caruso piece by piece from sources that had nothing to do with his own organization. Bank records accessed through channels that Garrett Cole opened quietly. Real estate holdings cross-referenced against shell company registrations that a contact in the county clerk's office pulled without asking why. Travel records. Phone billing patterns. The small, ordinary data trails that people leave when they believe no one is looking at them carefully enough to connect the dots. By the second morning, Garrett called again. 4 years and 7 months, Garrett said. His voice was completely flat. That is the earliest activity I can trace with confidence. And Damien, the earliest entry point I found in the account structure is dated 3 months before your father's diagnosis. Damien did not respond immediately. He was sitting at his desk with a pen in his hand that he had not used in 2 hours. "You are certain," he said. "I have the transaction records," Garrett said. "I can show you the timestamps. Someone inside your organization began building this parallel structure while your father was still running everything. It was not something that was inserted after he died. It was already there." Damien thanked him. He ended the call. He sat at the desk for a long time without moving. 3 months before his father's diagnosis, which meant that whoever had built this had begun while his father was still at full strength. While the old man was still making every decision, reviewing every account, trusting the people he had surrounded himself with for decades. They had built it under his nose, and his father had never known. Or the thought arrived quietly and settled with the weight of something that had always been waiting to be thought. Or his father had known. And that was the thing Elena was not ready to tell him yet. He got up from the desk and walked down the hallway and knocked on the guest room door. "Come in," she said immediately. She was awake. I was beginning to understand that she was almost always awake. He opened the door. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, her laptop open on her knees, several handwritten pages fanned out beside her. She looked up when he came in and read his face in the way she had already developed quickly and without making it obvious. "Garrett called," she said. 4 years and 7 months, Damien said. The structure was already in place before my father got sick. Something moved through her expression. Not surprise. The particular weight of someone who already knew something and was watching another person arrive at it. "Yes," she said quietly. "You knew that." "I suspected it," she said. Based on the reference points in the documentation, the architecture was too mature at the 3-year mark to have started there. It had to have roots further back. He came into the room and sat in the chair. "Tell me now," he said. "No more waiting. Tell me what you know about my father." She closed the laptop. She set it aside. She looked at him the way you look at someone before you say something that is going to change the shape of their memory of someone they loved. "Your father found out," she said. "About the network, about Vincent, about all of it." She paused. "He found out approximately 8 months before he died." The room was absolutely silent. "He came to me," she continued. "I was not working for him at that point. I had done some consulting work for a financial firm that had a peripheral connection to one of his legitimate businesses, and he reached out through an intermediary. He said he needed someone outside his organization to look at something without anyone inside the organization knowing he was looking. "He hired you," Damien said. "He brought me in quietly," she said. "Off the books. I spent 6 weeks going through what he gave me access to. And what I found was what I have already told you. Vincent Caruso. The parallel ledger. The external connections." She folded her hands in her lap. "But there was something else. Something your father found before he came to me. Something that the financial records alone do not show." Damien leaned forward slightly. "What? Your father believed that the network was not built to steal from him," she said. "He believed it was built to control him, to have something held over the organization that could be triggered if he ever became inconvenient to the people at the top of the structure. Richard Ashmore, the senators, the prosecutor Holt." She met his eyes. Vincent Caruso was not just skimming money and redirecting funds. He was maintaining a leverage structure. Evidence real and manufactured that could be used to destroy your father's operation and your father's reputation if your father ever pushed back against the people who were using his infrastructure. Damien's jaw tightened. "And my father did not push back." "He could not," she said. "Not immediately. Not without exposing the people he cared about. Not without exposing you." She said the last word carefully with a deliberateness that made him go still. "Part of what Caruso held was information about you specifically, about decisions you had made in your early years running certain operations. Real information. The kind that would have resulted in federal charges." "How was protecting me?" Damien said. Not a question. The sentence came out flatter than he intended the way sentences do, when they hit something that has always been true but has just become visible. "He was protecting you," Elena confirmed. "That is why he did not act immediately when he found out. He needed a way to dismantle the structure without triggering the leverage, and he needed someone outside his organization to help him do it." She paused. "That is where I came in." "And then he got sick," Damien said. "And then he got sick," she said. "And once he was sick, the timeline changed. He knew he did not have the time or the physical capacity to see it through. He made me promise to continue, to finish what he had started." Damien stood up from the chair abruptly, not in anger, in the particular physical response to a truth that is too large to hold while sitting still. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her. "He knew he was dying," Damien said. He spent the last 8 months of his life knowing what Caruso had done, and he never told me. He could not tell you without activating the very thing he was trying to prevent, she said. If you had known, you would have acted immediately. He knew that about you. He said it specifically. He said that his son acted from his heart, and that was his greatest strength and his most dangerous quality. Something happened in Damien's chest that he did not have a name for. An old pain and a new one, arriving at exactly the same time, occupying the same space, which meant neither one could be processed cleanly. He talked about me, Damien said. His voice was different, lower. He talked about you constantly, Elena said quietly. He loved you in the way that people love things they are afraid they have not properly protected. With that particular ache. She stopped for a moment. Then, he said that everything he had built, all of it, the empire, the influence, the reputation, none of it mattered, except whether you came out of it as a man he would be proud of. Damien did not turn around. And were you, she said almost gently, going to be that man before last night, before I told you any of this? The question fell into the silence and lay there. He turned around slowly. His face was controlled, but the control was the kind that comes from genuine effort, not habit. Underneath it, there was something that had not been visible in the preceding 48 hours. Something open and tired and honest. No, he said. Probably not. She nodded. Just once. Not in judgment. That is the other thing he was afraid of, she said. Not that you would fail. That you would succeed at becoming exactly the wrong version of yourself. He came back to the chair and sat down. He was quiet for a long moment, and she let him be quiet because she understood by now that this was how he processed things that mattered. Not by talking. By going very still and letting the information move through him at its own pace. Then he said, Vincent is coming to my office tomorrow. I have a standing meeting with him every 2 weeks. He does not know I know anything. You cannot change your behavior toward him, she said immediately. If he senses anything is different, the people above him will know within hours. I know, Damien said. I have been doing this my entire life. I know how to sit across from someone who has betrayed me and show them nothing. This is different from what you have done before, she said. Because this is not an enemy. This is someone you trusted personally. Someone who sat at your father's funeral and held your shoulder. Her voice was steady, but direct. The instinct will be to act, to end it immediately. You have to resist that. I know, he said again, but softer this time. Tell me what you are going to do, she said. I want to hear the plan. He looked at her. The request surprised him slightly. Not because it was unreasonable, but because it was practical in a way that shifted the dynamic between them. She was not asking to be reassured. She was asking to evaluate. I meet with Vincent tomorrow, he said. I give him nothing. I am completely normal. I listen to whatever he reports, and I respond the way I always respond. He paused. While that meeting is happening, Garrett will be completing the full analysis. Diane will be working on the legal framework for what comes next, and Marcus will have finished tracing the compass rose tattoo. And when you have all of that, then I make the approach to the people above Vincent from a position of complete information, he said. Not violence. Information. The kind that cannot be disputed and cannot be managed. She studied him. That is not what you would have done a week ago. No, he said. It is not. What changed? He looked at her directly. You told me my father was not protecting his empire. He was protecting me. That is a different kind of weight than I have been carrying. He paused. I do not want to carry it the wrong way. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked down at her hands. And for the first time since he had found her in that warehouse, the composure she maintained with such precise and deliberate effort showed the smallest crack. Not grief. Something more like release. Like a breath let out after being held for a very long time. He would have been glad to hear you say that, she said quietly. The meeting with Vincent Caruso happened the following afternoon. Damien arrived exactly on time. He sat at the head of the conference table in his downtown office, which was exactly what he did every other Tuesday. Vincent arrived 3 minutes later, which was also exactly what he always did. He was 61 years old, broad-shouldered, with the particular confidence of a man who had operated at a high level for a long time and had never been seriously challenged. He wore a dark suit. His silver cufflinks caught the light. He shook Damien's hand with the warmth of someone who had been doing so for 9 years. Damien watched the handshake with the same inner attention he had been applying to everything for the past 48 hours. He felt the firmness of it, the practiced ease, the slight extra pressure that was Vincent's habitual way of conveying reliability. He had felt that handshake dozens of times and never once rated as anything other than what it presented itself to be. Now he read every millimeter of it. "You look tired," Vincent said, settling into his chair across the table. "The Reyes situation still bothering you?" Marco Reyes, the accountant who had disappeared. "Loose ends," Damien said. "You know how I am about them." "Marco will surface," Vincent said easily. "Men like him always do. They run because they are afraid, and then reality catches up, and they come back looking for mercy." He opened the folder he had brought. "Should we go through the quarterly numbers?" "Please," Damien said. And he sat there for the next hour and 15 minutes, while the man who had been systematically betraying his family for nearly 5 years walked him through financial reports with the fluency of someone who had complete command of the subject matter. Vincent was good. Damien understood that now, in a way, he had never had reason to before. Vincent was very, very good. His explanations were precise. His projections were reasonable. His manner was exactly that of a trusted senior advisor doing his job with integrity, and underneath all of it, the entire time, Damien felt the cold, precise focus of knowing exactly what he was looking at. He did not let a single thing show. When the meeting ended, Vincent stood and gathered his folder and shook Damien's hand again at the door. "The Carver Meridian matter," Damien said, as Vincent was turning to leave. He said it the way he said everything in that meeting, casually, without weight. Vincent turned back. His expression did not change. "Carver Meridian. Investment firm. Someone mentioned it in connection with a compliance question. Do you know anything about them?" Vincent considered for exactly the right amount of time. Not too fast, which would suggest preparation. Not too slow, which would suggest alarm. "I think they closed some years back," he said. "I do not have a connection to them. Why is there something I should look at?" "No," Damien said. "Probably nothing. I will have someone follow up." "Of course," Vincent said. "Let me know if you need me to run anything down." "I always do," Damien said. Vincent left. The elevator doors closed. Damien stood in the doorway of the conference room for exactly 30 seconds. Then he went to his office, closed the door, sat at his desk, and called Marcus. "The tattoo," he said. "Got it," Marcus said. "Compass rose right wrist. There are 3 men in Chicago's private security contractor database who match that description with military background records. One of them works for a firm called Pinnacle Risk Management. Pinnacle has 3 city contracts and 1 state government consulting agreement." A pause. Pinnacle's primary legal counsel is a firm connected to Richard Ashmore. Damien closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he opened them. "And Vincent just reacted to the name Carver Meridian," he said. "Exactly the way a man reacts when he is hearing something he was not expecting and needs to assess the threat level before he responds." The other went outside the state. "Stay on it," Damien said. He ended the call and sat at the desk and looked at the wall. Vincent had made those calls within minutes of leaving the meeting. That told Damien exactly what he needed to know. The name Carver Meridian had meant something to Vincent. Something that required immediate communication with the people above him, which meant the window. Elena had identified the window that existed before the people who had attacked her knew she was still alive, was closing faster than he had calculated. He picked up his phone and called Elena directly. She answered on the second ring. "He reacted," Damien said, "to Carver Meridian, and he made calls immediately after leaving." A brief silence. "How long before they move?" "I do not know. Days, maybe less." He paused. "Are you ready to tell me the last piece?" "What last piece?" she said. The question was careful. She was buying herself 1 more second to assess how much he had figured out. The reason you knew my father personally, he said. Not as a consultant. Personally. The thing you have been deciding whether to tell me since the first night. A longer silence this time. Elena. He was my godfather, she said. The words landed quietly. The way things land when they are true in a way that reorganizes everything around them. My mother and your father grew up in the same neighborhood on the south side, she said. Her voice was very controlled, but it was the kind of control that is holding something back, not concealing it. They were close for 60 years. When I was born, he stood at the baptism. When my mother died, he was at the hospital. A pause. He was the reason I went into financial analysis. He believed I had a talent for it. He told me when I was 17 that a sharp mind used with discipline was more powerful than any weapon. She stopped. And he was the one who asked me 8 months before he died to finish what he could not. Damien was completely still. You have been carrying this for 4 years, he said. Yes. And you never came to me. He asked me not to, she said. He said you needed time. He said you would build yourself into the wrong version of yourself before you built yourself into the right one, and that trying to speed that up would only make it worse. Her voice was very quiet. He said you had to arrive at it on your own, and that when you were ready, you would find the truth, or the truth would find you. Damien put down the phone for a moment. He set it on the desk and stared at the ceiling and took a single breath. Then he picked it up again. He sent me you, Damien said. Not exactly, she said. He told me to keep building the case until it was unassailable, and then to find a way to bring it to the right person at the right moment. A pause. I was not planning on the warehouse. I was not planning on any of this happening this way. But here we are, Damien said. Here we are, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, get everything you have ready, every document, every file on that drive, and everything you have not yet put on it. We are running out of time, and we are going to need to move faster than I planned. How fast? I am going to call Diane now, he said. Tonight you and I are going to sit down and map out the complete exposure sequence. Who gets what information and in what order so that no single piece can be suppressed before the others land. He paused. We do this right, and there is no way for Ashmore or Holt or any of the others to contain it. We do it wrong, and we lose the only window we have. And Vincent, she said. Vincent, Damien said slowly, is going to make a mistake, because he is panicking right now, which means he is going to try to close a gap he does not fully understand. And when he tries to close it, he is going to leave something behind. You are going to let him move, she said. Not in alarm, in recognition. I am going to let him take exactly one step, Damien said. Because the step he takes will tell me everything about how far up this goes and who else is involved. And then I am going to stop him. She was quiet for a moment. That is a risk, she said. Yes, he said. Your father would have done the same thing, she said. He felt the sentence move through him in a way that nothing had moved through him in a very long time. Not painful. Something older than pain. The feeling of being known by someone who has no reason to flatter you. I know, he said. He hung up and sat at the desk for 30 more seconds. Then he opened his laptop, pulled up the complete file structure Garrett had sent him, and began building the sequence that would bring every piece of what Elena Marquez had spent 4 years assembling into a position from which it could not be stopped. Outside somewhere across the city, Vincent Caruso was making phone calls he believed were protecting him. He did not yet understand that every word he spoke was pulling the walls of what he had built closer to the ground. And the man who had trusted him for 9 years was the one holding the last support. Marcus called at 11:47 that night. Damien was at his desk with the exposure sequence spread across 3 open windows on his laptop, cross-referencing the order in which each piece of documentation needed to land and with whom. He had been at it for 4 hours. Elena was at the table beside him, her ankle propped on a second chair, working through her own copy of the file structure, with a pen marking sequences and flagging gaps in the chain of custody that might give a defense attorney room to challenge authenticity. They had not spoken much in the last 2 hours. They did not need to. They had settled into the particular rhythm of two people working toward the same thing with complete mutual understanding of what the stakes were. When the phone rang, Damien picked it up immediately. "Vincent just left his building," Marcus said. "On foot, no driver, personal cell left in his apartment." Damien was already standing. "Where is he going?" "East on Michigan. He picked up a tail 3 blocks out. One of ours he did not make him." A pause. "He went into the parking structure on Randolph. He met someone inside. White male 50s came in from the north entrance. They talked for approximately 9 minutes. Our guy could not get close enough for audio, but he got photos. Send them." The photos came through 30 seconds later. Damien enlarged the best one on his phone and held it where Elena could see. She leaned forward and looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. "That is Holt," she said. Her voice was flat and certain. "Federal Prosecutor Holt. The man I told you about. The one who had me brought in." Damien looked at the photo for another moment. Then he set the phone face down on the table very deliberately, the way he set things down when he needed his hands free in order to think. "Vincent made his move in less than 12 hours, he said." "He panicked," Elena said. "Carver Meridian rattled him more than you anticipated." "No," Damien said. "I anticipated it. I just did not expect him to go directly to Holt. I expected an intermediary first." He picked up the phone again. "Marcus, stay on Holt. I want to know where he goes after this and who he contacts within the next 6 hours. Do not approach either of them. Do not do anything except watch." "Understood," Marcus said. Damien ended the call. He stood at the table and looked at the exposure sequence on his laptop. Then he looked at Elena. "The timeline just compressed," he said. "By how much? Holt knows someone inside your network is still active," he said. "Vincent told him something at that meeting, and whatever he told him, Holt is now in motion. Which means we cannot wait for a clean sequential release. We need everything moving simultaneously." Elena absorbed that. She did not show alarm. She showed the focused recalibration of someone who had been building contingency plans alongside her primary plan from the beginning. "The 2 insurance contacts I mentioned," she said. "The people I left fragments with. I need to reach them tonight." "Who are they?" "A journalist at the Tribune named Carla Weston," she said, "and a retired federal agent named Don Ferris who worked financial crimes for 22 years. He left the Bureau under circumstances that were never fully explained, but that I have reason to believe were connected to Holt's interference in a previous investigation." "Ferris would have standing," Damien said immediately. "He has more than standing," Elena said. "He has his own documentation from the investigation that was shut down. He has been sitting on it for 3 years because he had no corroboration. What I have corroborates everything he has." She paused. "Together what we bring Ferris is a complete picture, not circumstantial, not inferential, documented." "And Weston." "Carla Weston has been trying to break a story on municipal corruption for 18 months. She has pieces but not enough to publish without legal exposure. What we give her is the full chain." Elena's voice was precise and fast, the speed of someone who has thought through this scenario many times and is now running the version where time is the variable she cannot control. If Weston publishes and Ferris files at the same time, Holt cannot suppress either one without the other becoming the bigger story. They cancel out his ability to contain it. Damien nodded slowly. "And the senators. The state-level exposure." "Diane needs to file the financial documentation as a formal disclosure with the State Ethics Board simultaneously," Elena said. "Not through Holt's jurisdiction. State level, not federal, which means Holt cannot touch it directly." "Diane can do that," Damien said. He was already reaching for his phone. "Damien." She said his name with a directness that made him stop. "Before you make those calls, there is one more thing you need to know." He looked at her. "Vincent did not just go to Holt to report a threat," she said. "He went to Holt because he is afraid, and a man who is afraid does unpredictable things." She held his gaze. "There is documentation on that drive about a specific action that Vincent took 4 years ago that he cannot afford to have surface. It is the thing he is most protecting. More than the money, more than the network connections. This one specific action." What action? Damien said. She was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that comes before something that changes everything. Your father's death was recorded as natural causes, she said. Cardiac arrest secondary to his illness. That is what the death certificate says. That is what the attending physician certified. She stopped. 3 months before he died, your father told me he believed someone inside his circle was accelerating his condition, not causing the illness itself, managing the treatment in a way that removed the possibility of recovery. The room did not move. Damien did not move. He did not have proof, she continued. He had a suspicion. He told me because he wanted it documented that the suspicion existed. He said if he was wrong, it would die with him. And if he was right, eventually someone would find the thread. Her voice had gone very quiet. I found the thread 14 months ago. A pharmacy dispensing record. A substitution in the medication that his physician prescribed. The substitution was ordered by someone with access to his medical management account. She paused. That access had been granted to Vincent Caruso as part of a caregiving authorization your father signed in the last year of his life, when he believed Vincent was helping manage his affairs. Damien was completely still. You are telling me, he said, and his voice was different now, stripped of every layer except the bare fact of the question, that Vincent Caruso killed my father. I am telling you that the documentation suggests Vincent Caruso interfered with your father's medical treatment in a way that would have significantly accelerated his death, Elena said, and that your father suspected it, and that he made me promise before he died that if I ever found proof, I would make sure it could not be buried. The silence in the room was the kind that has a physical weight. Damien turned away. He walked to the window. He stood there with his hands at his sides and his back to her. And for a long moment, the only sound in the room was the distant noise of the city and the faint sound of his own breathing, which he was controlling with an effort that was visible even from across the room. Elena did not speak. She did not move. She let him hold it, because she knew what was happening inside him. She had known this moment was coming since the day she had found the pharmacy record. She had thought about it hundreds of times. The way it would land, the way it would feel to be the person delivering it, the weight of carrying it for 14 months and finally setting it down in front of the person who most needed to know it and most needed to be protected from what knowing it would make him want to do. He knew, Damien said finally. His voice was low and controlled in a way that sounded like a door held shut against considerable pressure. My father knew that man was killing him, and he still protected me from knowing it. He protected you from acting on it before you had the means to act cleanly, Elena said carefully. There is a difference. He was not keeping it from you to spare your feelings. He was keeping it from you because acting on it without the full evidence structure would have destroyed everything he was trying to preserve. Including me, Damien said. Including you. He turned around. His face was composed in a way that Elena had not seen before. Not the controlled blankness of professional management. Something harder than that. Something that had gone past the ordinary range of controlled emotion into a place that was very cold and very clear. I want to go after him right now, he said. I want you to understand that that is the only thing I want to do at this moment. I know, she said. And you are going to tell me why I should not. Because your father chose not to, she said. And your father was the smartest man either of us has ever known. She held his gaze without flinching. He chose not to, because he understood that destroying one man does not destroy the system that man serves. And the system is what has been destroying people. Not just your father. Not just me. The politicians this network has bought. The investigations it has buried. The people who have had no recourse because the people who were supposed to protect them were on the payroll of the people who hurt them. Damien said nothing. You take Vincent, she said, and Holt and Ashmore survive and find another Vincent. And in 5 years, everything your father died protecting you from is still in place with different names attached. She paused. You take all of them simultaneously through channels they cannot control, and it is over. The room was very quiet. He wanted it done right, Damien said, not asking, confirming. He wanted it done in a way that lasted, she said. Yes. Damien looked at her for a long moment. Something was moving through his expression that was not quite readable. It was the look of a man who was rebuilding the internal architecture of a decision in real time, replacing one structure with another, and the replacement was harder because the first structure was the one his body had been preparing for since the moment she told him what Vincent had done. He came back to the table and sat down. He picked up his phone. "I am going to call Diane," he said. "Then I am going to call Ferris directly. I need you to give me his number." He looked at her. "And then you are going to call Carla Weston, tonight, because we are not waiting until morning." "Agreed," she said. She gave him Ferris's number. He dialed while she reached for her own phone. Don Ferris answered on the fourth ring with the voice of a man who slept light and kept his phone close for exactly this kind of call. "My name is Damian Valenti," Damian said. "I have Elena Marquez here. She says you have been waiting 3 years for corroboration on the Holt matter." A silence that lasted exactly long enough to tell Damian that Don Ferris was very awake and had been expecting this call in the abstract for longer than he had expected it tonight specifically. "Where did you get this number?" Ferris said. "Elena," Damian said. Another pause. "Put her on." Damian handed Elena the phone. She took it and said, "Don, it is me. I am safe, and we have everything." A pause while she listened. I know it has been a long time, but we are moving tonight, and I need you to be ready to file by morning." Another pause. "Yes, it includes the pharmacy record. It includes Holt's fingerprints on the original case suppression. It includes the complete account structure going back 4.5 years. She listened again. Her expression shifted slightly, something that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to relief. "Yes, all of it. Tonight." She handed the phone back to Damian. "He is in," she said. Damian brought the phone back to his ear. "Ferris, I am going to have a courier bring you a physical copy of the documentation within 90 minutes. Original encrypted files through a secure transfer link at the same time. I need you to have legal counsel review and be prepared to file first thing in the morning." "I have had legal counsel prepared for 2 years, Ferris said. His voice was dry and absolutely certain. "You just get me the documentation." "It is already coming," Damian said. He ended the call and looked across the table. Elena was on her own phone with Weston speaking quickly and precisely, already 3 sentences into an explanation that suggested she had rehearsed this call almost as many times as she had rehearsed telling Damian about his father. Damian opened a secure message thread and began drafting the transfer sequence to Garrett, who would package the documentation for Ferris. He sent it. He sent a second message to Diane with the full filing brief for the State Ethics Board and a single line at the bottom that read "Morning simultaneously, with federal filing no delay." Diane responded in 4 minutes. "Understood. Ready." Then Marcus called again. "Holt made 2 calls after the parking structure," Marcus said. "First call was to a number registered to a logistics company in Skokie. Second call was to Richard Ashmore's personal cell." "Ashmore," Damian said. "The call to Ashmore lasted 11 minutes, Marcus said. After it ended, Ashmore's car left his residence. He is moving. Where, north, we are tracking. Stay on him," Damian said. "And I need you to do one more thing." "Name it." "Vincent," Damian said. "I need you to bring him in, not to me, to the secondary location on Fulton, quietly. I do not want him to have the opportunity to make any additional calls." A pause. "You want him detained?" "I want him somewhere he cannot communicate with Holt or Ashmore for the next 12 hours, Damian said. "After that, what happens to Vincent Caruso will not be decided by me." The sentence landed in a way that Marcus understood completely. This was not the old version of this kind of problem. This was not the decision Damian Valenti would have made 7 days ago. And Marcus, who had worked beside Damian for 11 years and understood the full weight of what that difference meant, said only, "Understood. Consider it done." He hung up. Elena had finished her call with Weston and was watching him. "Weston," he said. "She is ready," Elena said. "She needed 15 minutes to pull 2 things from her existing file, and then she is writing tonight." A pause. "She wanted to know if you would give her a statement." "What kind of statement?" "A statement acknowledging that your organization's financial infrastructure was used without your knowledge as part of the network, and that you are cooperating with the exposure effort. Elena watched him carefully. She said it makes the story cleaner. It removes the ambiguity about whether you are part of it or opposed to it. Damien was quiet for a moment. This was the thing he had not anticipated having to decide tonight. Not because he was unwilling, because saying it publicly meant something that went beyond the legal and strategic. It meant admitting on the record that something had happened inside his world that he had not known about and had not prevented. It meant standing in front of everyone who had feared and respected the Valenti name for 30 years and acknowledging a gap in the fortress. For a man who had built his identity on control and visibility, it was the hardest thing on the list. "Yes," he said. "I will give her a statement." Elena's expression shifted, just slightly. The relief was not about the strategy. He could see that. It was about something else. The recognition of a choice made for the right reason rather than the convenient one. She reached for a notepad. "Tell me what you want to say, and I will help you shape it." I thought for a moment. Then he said, "My father built something that was worth protecting. For 4 years I protected the wrong version of it. This is the correction." She wrote it down, read it back to him, then looked up. "That is exactly right," she said. He nodded once. They worked through the next 3 hours without stopping. The documentation packages went out. Ferris confirmed receipt at 1:15 in the morning. Diane confirmed that the state ethics filing was structured and ready to submit at 9 a.m. Weston sent Elena a message at 2:40 that said simply, "Story is written holding for the filing confirmation to drop simultaneously." At 3 in the morning, Marcus confirmed that Vincent Caruso was at the Fulton location. Cooperative Marcus said, which meant that when Marcus had appeared at his door with 2 other men, Vincent had understood immediately that the mathematics had shifted and that resistance was not a productive response. At 3:20, Marcus sent a second message. Ashmore's car had stopped at a private airfield north of the city. Damien read the message and felt the first genuine urgency of the night replace the cold, focused momentum he had been operating in. "Ashmore is trying to run," he said. Elena looked up from the table. "Can you stop him?" "Not legally," Damien said. "Not in a way that holds up." He stared at the message. "But Ferris can." He called Ferris back. "Ashmore is at a private airfield north of the city. He may be attempting to leave the country." The sound from Ferris's end changed immediately, the particular sound of a man who has been ready for a specific moment for 3 years and has just been told the moment is here. "I am calling a federal contact right now. Someone who is not compromised. Give me the airfield." Damien gave him everything Marcus had sent. 15 minutes, Ferris said and hung up. Damien set the phone on the table. He looked at Elena. She was watching him with the same careful attention she had been watching him with since the first night, but the quality of it was different now. It was not assessment anymore. It was something quieter than that. "It is moving," she said. "It is moving," he said. He sat back in his chair. For the first time in 4 days, the relentless forward pressure of managing a dozen simultaneous threads eased slightly. Not because anything was finished, because the pieces were in the right hands now, because the sequence was running, because the thing his father had tried to build toward in the last 8 months of his life, the thing Elena had carried alone for 4 years, was finally irrevocably in motion. He looked at her across the table. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her ribs were still wrapped, and she was using a pen cap she had been turning in her fingers for the last hour as her only visible outlet for the tension she was carrying. She had been the steadiest person in every room she had occupied for the last 4 days. She had not broken once. She had not asked for anything she did not need. She had given him the most painful truth of his life about his father, and then immediately helped him figure out what to do with it, rather than leaving him to carry it alone. "You should rest," he said. "So should you," she said. "I am not going to," he said. "Neither am I," she said. He almost smiled. It was small and brief, and he did not let it fully form, but it was there. "My father chose well," he said. "When he chose you." She looked at him for a long moment. The pen cap went still in her fingers. "He said the same thing about you," she said quietly. long before you gave him reason to be certain of it." She paused. "He said that you would find your way back to yourself, that the anger was a detour, not a destination." Her voice was very steady, but underneath it was the weight of someone who had been carrying someone else's love for a person for 4 years and was now finally able to hand it directly to the person it had always been meant for. "He never doubted you. Not once." Damien looked at the table. He did not speak for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes were steady and very clear, and what was in them was not grief exactly, and not relief exactly, but the particular expression of a man who has just received something he did not know he had been missing until the moment it arrived. "Then let us make sure we finish it," he said. She nodded, and they went back to work. Ferris called back at 3:54 in the morning. Damien picked up before the second ring. "Ashmore is detained," Ferris said. His voice carried the particular quality of a man who had waited 3 years to say a specific sentence, and was now saying it with complete control, because he had learned that the moments you most want to let yourself feel are the moments you most need to stay focused. Federal agents intercepted him on the tarmac. He had a carry bag with 2 passports and approximately $400,000 in cash. A pause. "He is not going anywhere." Damien set the phone down on the table without ending the call and looked at Elena. She had heard. She did not celebrate. She did not react with relief or triumph or any of the emotional release that 4 years of carrying this kind of weight might reasonably have produced. She just looked at him with steady eyes and gave one slow nod, the nod of someone who had never stopped believing this moment would come, but had also never allowed herself to count on it until it was real. He brought the phone back to his ear. "What does he know?" Damien said. "About what triggered tonight?" "He knows someone talked," Ferris said. "He does not know who or what we have, which gives us a narrow window before his attorneys start managing his communications, and we lose the advantage of his uncertainty." He paused. "I want to move on Holt by 7 this morning. I need your documentation package in front of independent federal oversight before Holt has any indication that Ashmore was picked up." "It is already prepared," Damien said. "I will have Garrett transmit the complete package to your oversight contact the moment you send me the secure address." "Sending it now," Ferris said. The transmission came through 90 seconds later. Damien forwarded it to Garrett with a single line, "Send everything immediately." Garrett confirmed receipt and transmission in 4 minutes. The man was awake at 4 in the morning and moving without complaint, which told Damien something about the quality of people he had chosen when he had chosen well. He set the phone down again and looked at Elena. "Holt at 7, he said. "Then we have 2 hours, she said. 2 hours, he confirmed. She stood up slowly from the table, careful with her ribs, the way she was always careful managing the discomfort without drawing attention to it. She went to the kitchen and came back with 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of him without asking whether he wanted it, because by now she knew he did, and he accepted it without thanking her. Because by now the ordinary formalities between them had been replaced by something more efficient and more honest than politeness. They spent the next hour going through the documentation one final time. Not because either of them believed there were gaps, because this was the kind of work that did not allow for almost. It allowed for complete, or it allowed for failure, and failure was not a variable they were willing to carry. At 5:15, Carla Weston sent a message to Elena's phone. "Story cleared by legal. Ready to publish on your signal." Elena showed Damien the message. He read it and nodded. "Tell her to hold until 6:50, he said. 10 minutes before Ferris moves on Holt. That way the story is live before Holt's attorneys can get in front of it." Elena typed the message and sent it. Weston responded in under a minute. "Understood. 6:50, standing by." The next hour moved the way the last hours of something large always move. Not slowly, with a kind of compressed density, every minute carrying more weight than its length should allow. Damien reviewed the statement he had given Weston one final time. The words were clean and direct, and he did not change any of them. "My father built something worth protecting. For 4 years, I protected the wrong version of it. This is the correction." He had meant it when he said it, and he meant it now, and he understood that the meaning of it would outlast this morning and every morning after it, and that was not a comfortable thing to understand, but it was the right thing, and he had stopped confusing comfort with rightness a long time ago. Specifically, he had stopped confusing them the morning Elena Marquez told him what his father had known and what his father had chosen. At 6:15, Marcus called. "Vincent is asking to speak with you," Marcus said. Damien was quiet for a moment. Elena looked up from across the table. "Is he?" Damien said. "He has been quiet all night," Marcus said. "But in the last 30 minutes he has been asking. He says he wants to explain." "What do you think he wants?" Damien said. Not rhetorically. He trusted Marcus's read on people in confined and pressured situations. "I think he knows something has moved," Marcus said. "I think he can feel it the way you can feel weather before it arrives. And I think he is hoping that if he talks to you directly, there is still a version of this where he gets to negotiate." Damien looked at Elena. She was watching him with the careful attention of someone who had an opinion and was deciding whether to offer it. "What do you think?" he said to her. She did not hesitate. "I think you should go," she said. "Not to negotiate, not to give him anything, but because you have spent 9 years building a version of Vincent Caruso in your head that was never real, and you need to see the real one before this is finished. For yourself, not for the case." He held her gaze. "You are right," he said. He told Marcus he was coming. He stood up from the table and put on his jacket and then stopped in the doorway of the kitchen. "I will be back before 6:50, he said. "I know," she said. He left. The location on Fulton was a clean, quiet space that Damien's organization used for the kind of conversations that needed to happen without witnesses or external interference. Vincent was in a room on the second floor, sitting at a plain table with a cup of cold coffee in front of him, still wearing the suit he had been wearing when Marcus picked him up the night before. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years since the parking structure meeting. The confidence that had been the defining texture of his presence for 9 years was gone. What was underneath it was something smaller and very tired. He looked up when Damien came in. Damien sat across from him. He did not speak. Vincent looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked up. "How much do you know?" he said. "Everything," Damien said. Vincent absorbed that. His hands, which had been flat on the table, curled slightly inward. "Then you know I did not design this," he said. "I was approached. When your father was still running things, I was approached by people who made it very clear that cooperation was not optional." "You had a choice," Damien said. "I had a family," Vincent said. His voice was not defensive. It was the flat statement of a man giving context he knows is insufficient. They made it clear what the alternative looked like. "And my father's medication," Damien said. He said it the way he said everything in high-pressure situations. Quietly, without visible emotion, giving nothing away about what the words cost him to say. Something happened in Vincent's face. The small remaining architecture of composure that he had managed to hold through the night collapsed in the space of half a second. It was not guilt exactly. It was the look of a man who has carried a specific weight for 4 years and has just been told that the person who most needed to know has now been told, and the carrying is over, and what remains is the full exposure of what the weight was. "I did not want to," Vincent said. His voice was very low. "But you did," Damien said. Vincent did not answer, because there was no answer that was not the confirmation Damien had already given him. "They told me your father was going to expose everything," Vincent said. "They said if he did, everyone connected to the network would be destroyed, including me, including my family." He stopped. "They said the medication adjustment would look natural, that it would accelerate what was already happening without being detectable." He looked at the table. "I told myself it was not murder. I told myself he was already dying. I told myself I was just moving a timeline." "You told yourself a lot of things," Damien said. "Yes," Vincent said. "I did." The room was very quiet. Damien looked at the man across from him. He had been preparing for this moment in some form since Elena had told him about the pharmacy record. He had thought about it during the hours of work and planning. He had considered what it would feel like to sit in front of the person who had taken his father's last months and compressed them for the convenience of people who valued their own safety above a man's life. He had expected rage, the particular cold-focused rage that he had always run on, that had been the engine of every consequential decision he had made since the day his father died, and he had taken over and built the harder, colder version of everything his father had built. But sitting here looking at Vincent Caruso's face, what he felt was not rage. It was grief. Clean, direct grief, without the anger wrapped around it that had always made it manageable before. Grief for his father. For the 8 months of his father's life that had been spent knowing what was happening to him and choosing to protect Damien anyway. For the 9 years of a loyalty he had believed in completely, that had been a construction, a performance, a long, careful lie worn comfortably because it was convenient for the person wearing it. And underneath the grief, something quieter. Something he had not expected. He felt sorry for Vincent Caruso. Not in a way that absolved him. In the way you feel sorry for someone who made a choice that destroyed them long before anyone else found out about it. Vincent had been carrying this for 4 years, and whatever safety he had purchased with it, he had paid for in the slow internal erosion that comes from knowing exactly who you are and having no way to not know. Damien stood up. "The documentation is already with federal oversight," he said. "Don Ferris is moving on Holt at 7 this morning. Ashmore was detained at the airport 4 hours ago." He paused. "You will be given the opportunity to cooperate fully with the investigation. What you do with that opportunity is your decision. It will not be made under pressure from me." Vincent looked up. He seemed genuinely surprised by that, like he had expected something else, something older and more familiar from the man sitting across from him. "That is it," Vincent said. "That is it," Damien said. "You were wrong. You did something that cannot be undone. The system will deal with what that means." He met Vincent's eyes directly for one last moment. "I am done dealing with it." He left the room. He went downstairs and out to the car. He sat in the back seat for a moment before telling Marcus to drive. He had thought the confrontation with Vincent was the thing he needed. Elena had been right that he needed to see the real person before it was finished. But what he had not anticipated was the particular release that came from choosing not to do the thing he would have done before. Choosing the system. Choosing the process. Choosing to let the truth do the work instead of the anger. His father had made that choice in the last 8 months of his life. Had chosen to build the structure that could outlast the anger rather than act on the anger and destroy the structure. For the first time, Damien understood that choice from the inside. He told Marcus to drive. He was back at the house at 6:41. Elena looked up when he came through the door. She read his face the way she always read his face, quickly and accurately, and whatever she found there made something in her own expression ease. "Okay," she said. "Yes," he said. "Let Weston publish." She sent the message at 6:49, 1 minute early. At 6:57, Ferris called to confirm that federal agents had arrived at Prosecutor Holt's office. Holt had not yet been informed of Ashmore's detention. The element of surprise, as Ferris had calculated, was complete. At 7:15, Carla Weston's story went live on the Tribune's digital platform, with Damien's statement embedded in the 4th paragraph. By 7:43, other outlets had picked it up. By 8, it was national. Damien sat at the kitchen table and watched Elena read the notifications coming through on her phone. She read each one without visible reaction. Just the quiet absorption of someone who has been moving toward a fixed point for so long that arriving at it does not feel like an explosion. It feels like a door opening that has been closed for a very long time. The relief is real, but it is quiet. It belongs to the person who earned it, not to the audience watching. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her face changed. Something she had not been expecting, and the unexpectedness of it made something in her composure shift in a way that none of the last 5 days had managed to shift it. She answered. "Dawn," she said. She listened. Her free hand came up to her mouth. She held it there. Damien watched her. She was not crying. She did not cry. But her eyes went very bright, and she pressed her fingers against her lips, and her shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. The drop of someone releasing a tension that has been held in a specific muscle for so long, the muscle had forgotten how to not hold it. She listened for another full minute. Then she said very quietly, "Thank you. Tell them thank you." She paused. "Yes, I will." She ended the call. She set the phone on the table. She looked at Damien. "The two senators," she said. "Their offices have both confirmed they are cooperating with the investigation, voluntarily, before any formal charges." She paused. "Ferris says it means the legal protection structure for the entire network collapses. There is no one left at the political level to suppress anything." Damien nodded slowly. "It is done," he said. "It is done," she said. They sat with that for a moment. Just the two of them in a kitchen in the early morning, with the city waking up outside, and 4 years of a dead man's unfinished work, finally completely finished. Then Damien said, "What do you do now?" The question surprised her. He could see it. In the 4 years she had been building toward this point, she had apparently not spent much time thinking about what existed on the other side of it. The destination had consumed the imagination so completely that the territory beyond it was unmapped. "I have not thought about it," she admitted. "Think about it now," he said. She looked at the table. She turned the pen cap she had been carrying for 5 days over in her fingers. "I want to sleep," she said. "For about a week." A pause. "And then I want to do something that matters. With what I know. With the way I think." She looked up at him. "I spent 4 years using what I am good at to dismantle something. I think I would like to spend some time using it to build something." "What kind of something?" he said. "The kind that helps people who do not have the resources to find what I found," she said. "People who know something is wrong but do not have the tools to prove it. Who end up in warehouses in the rain because they got too close to a truth that powerful people needed buried." She said it plainly, without performance, the way she said everything. "There are a lot of those people." Damien looked at her for a long moment. "I have resources," he said, "and I have been trying to figure out what to do with them that my father would have considered worth doing." She went very still. "I am not asking you to run it," he said. "I am asking if you would be willing to help design it, the structure, the framework, the way it functions." He paused. "You are the best person I have ever seen at building something that holds under pressure." She looked at him. "You are serious." "I am always serious," he said. She held his gaze. And what passed between them in that moment was not romantic exactly, and not merely professional. It was the particular recognition of two people who have been through something that almost no two people ever go through together and have come out the other side knowing exactly who the other person is. Not the presented version, not the managed version, the real one. "Yes," she said. "I am willing." He nodded once. Then he stood up, went to the counter and poured himself another cup of coffee, which was his version of marking a moment without making a production of it. He came back to the table and sat down. 2 months later, the formal charges were filed. Vincent Caruso entered a cooperation agreement with federal prosecutors and provided testimony that sealed every remaining gap in the case against Holt Ashmore and the 2 senators whose early cooperation had already significantly reduced their political futures. Holt was indicted on 7 counts, including obstruction of justice conspiracy and abuse of federal authority. Ashmore faced 12 counts. The senators negotiated plea agreements that ended their political careers and resulted in significant civil financial penalties. The pharmacy record, pertaining to the interference with Damien's father's medication, was included in the Caruso Cooperation Agreement as a separate count of criminal culpability. It was the count that Vincent had no defense for and did not attempt to defend. The story ran for 3 weeks in every major outlet in the country. Damien gave one interview. He sat across from a journalist and said exactly what he had said to Weston. No more, no less. He did not explain himself beyond what was true. He did not perform remorse. He acknowledged what his organization had been used for without his knowledge, and stated plainly that the structure of his operations was being rebuilt under full independent financial oversight going forward. When the journalist asked whether he felt vindicated by the exposure, he said, I feel like I finished something my father started. That is enough. The journalist wanted more. Damien had nothing more to give, because that sentence was the complete truth, and the complete truth does not require elaboration. 6 months after the night in the warehouse, Damien stood in the offices of an organization that did not yet have a name but had a structure, a funding framework, a legal charter, and a team of 4 people. Elena had identified and recruited over the preceding 8 weeks. The organization's purpose was exactly what she had described at the kitchen table. Investigative support for individuals and communities who had evidence of wrongdoing but lacked the technical and legal resources to make that evidence actionable. Elena stood beside him in the office, showing him the operational framework on a large screen. She walked him through each element with the same precision she had used to walk him through everything else. She was wearing a jacket that did not have a torn shoulder. Her ankle had healed completely. The bruise that had been on her cheek for the first week after he found her was long gone, and looking at her now in this room, doing this work with this particular quality of focused attention that he had come to understand was simply who she was. It was difficult to align the image with the woman he had found on the warehouse floor, not because she seemed different, because she seemed entirely like herself. And the self she was had been present from the first moment in that warehouse. He simply had not had the full context to understand what he was looking at. "The name," he said when she finished. "Have you decided?" She had been thinking about it for 2 weeks. She had not told him any of the options she had considered, and he had not asked because he understood instinctively that this was something she needed to arrive at without external input. She looked at the screen for a moment. "The Valenti Foundation," she said. "If you are willing." He looked at her. "It was his," she said simply. All of it was his from the beginning. The decision to find out. The decision to use the truth instead of the anger. The decision to protect you even when protecting you meant carrying it alone. She turned to look at him directly. "It should carry his name." Damien was quiet for a moment. The room around them was still. Outside, the city moved the way it always moved, indifferent and continuous. The same city his father had navigated for 60 years, with the particular combination of toughness and love that Damien had spent 4 years reducing to its harder half. "Yes," he said. "I am willing." Elena looked back at the screen and made a small note on the document in her hand. Professional. Precise. Moving forward. And Damien stood beside her and looked at the name on the screen and felt his father's presence in the room, not as grief, not as absence, but as the specific warmth of something that has been done right. Something built to last. Something that would carry people the way his father had tried to carry people, with the understanding that strength is not the capacity to destroy what threatens you, but the willingness to protect what matters, even when it costs you everything. Even when no one watching understands what it is costing, even when the person you are protecting will not know until long after you are gone. The woman who had been left in the dark to carry a truth that could have broken her had carried it instead with everything she had for 4 years, until she could put it in the hands of the person it had always been meant to reach. And the man who had found her in a warehouse and asked one simple question had become, in asking it, the man his father always knew he would eventually choose to be. Neither of them had arrived here because the path was easy. They had arrived because they had refused, each in their own way, to let the hardest parts of what they knew turn them into something smaller than the truth deserved. That was the inheritance, not the empire, not the influence, not the name. The refusal to let pain be the final word. That was what Joseph Valenti had left his son. And his son, standing in a room that would help people who had no one else to turn to, was finally completely carrying it right.